will call to order 1 minute early this meeting for today, October 5th, for the College Township Council. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Earl, can you hear us?
You're muted, Jen. It's red.
Yeah, it's muted.
Okay, that's why he looked a little. Can you hear us now? Okay.
He's muted now.
Great.
All good.
I figured that was what was.
Okay. All right, so are there any members of the public wishing to address council for anything that is not on the agenda, this evening's agenda tonight? Anyone in the room, anyone online? Earl just dropped off. He did. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on.
He's still there.
Wait, hang on a sec.
Wait.
I'm just gonna do that hand, that's all.
Earl, are you here for anything not on the agenda?
No, I just wanted to listen in this today.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. All right, any members of council wishing to add an agenda item this evening? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to special presentations. Our first one will be on Thompson Woods Preserve Governance Committee from Mr. Keogh, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for making time on your agenda for me. My name is Bill Keogh, and I am the current chair of the Governance Committee. There are two committees. I'm the chair of the Governance Committee for the Thompson Woods Nature Preserve. It's my intent to make a presentation at least twice a year to both this council as well as Borough Council, because you and the borough are in partnership in this particular project. And so I say it's my intent to do it twice a year. However, I add the caveat, unless otherwise necessary. Because timing is always an important aspect, especially when you all are dealing with budgets and you all are dealing with certain kinds of things. You may want to have, or we may want to have, an additional time with you to bring you up to date on something. Go ahead, Mike. A couple of you are new, at least new to the most recent activities related to Thompson Woods. Just in the interest of keeping everybody on a reasonably same page, quick history here. We're dealing with a little more than a 43-acre plot of land, and there are two parcels to the plot of land that we're dealing with, and they are separated by a West Penn Power utility right-of-way. It was the original intent of this particular tract that it be a public preserve. And it's important, and we look at it as important, that you differentiate in your mind the difference between a park and a preserve. And historically, it appears that since it was formed in the beginning of 2000, late 1999, there is a muddied water out there in terms of the public in understanding the difference between a preserve and a park and which one is which. And so that has already presented to us a challenge in terms of the job that we have. Go ahead, Mike. 1999, 2000, quick history. The Clearwater Conservancy, College Township, and State College partnered with regard to this tract of land. And then the Conservancy actually purchased the property and then immediately transferred it to College Township and the borough. Besides the power line that transverses this particular piece of property, the borough and College Township property lines cross this piece of boundary, and hence both of you as municipalities are partners in this particular tract. I will be making this same presentation to Borough Council within the next 2 or 3 weeks, so that you are parallel informed as we go along. In 2003, it was decided that maintenance issues with regard to this track would, at least at that time, be assigned to the Center Region Park and Recreation Authority. And at that time, the governance aspect was decided to be assigned to the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center, and they had their own, created an advisory committee specifically for this particular track. Jump ahead to 2018. The subcommittee of the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center was dissolved as far as this track goes. And while I wasn't a part of that, it was mostly because they had no business over that period of time. And part of that, I think, had to do with the fact that other than a complaint here and there wasn't any real effort at leadership coming from the borough, from the township, or you know, what do we do? So jump ahead again to September of 22, which is last year. The borough and College Township actually sat down and created an intermunicipal agreement of cooperation. And in that intermunicipal agreement, it was decided on how we wanted to establish a governance structure for this particular tract of land. Hence, and go ahead, Mike, 2 committees were called for in this agreement, and the first of those 2 committees was the governance committee itself. And you can see there how that governance committee is made up. I represent one member of the Center Region Park and Recreation Authority, which was called out in the agreement to be part of that membership group, with 2 from College Township and 2 from the State College Borough. And you can read for yourself the responsibilities of the group, but primarily the governance group was the lead group with regard to management of this particular tract of land and where we were going to go from here. That was the task that we took on. Go ahead, Mike. In addition, the agreement called for an advisory group. And we look at the advisory group as kind of a boots on the ground group. These are individuals who interact with this particular tract of land and have great interest in how it evolves and is used. And we look to the advisory group as the group who initiates to us as the governance group some of the issues, standing issues that appear to be coming up. If a particular problem comes up, we also use this group, and will be using this group, to advise the governance group with regard to particular actions that we might want to take in managing this particular piece of property. And you can see by who's represented that we have a fairly good cross-section of individuals assigned to the advisory group. At the moment, the governance committee is meeting monthly. At the moment, the advisory committee is meeting quarterly. That may change. We look at it in this early development stage as whatever's necessary. And that's kind of the philosophy that we've taken with regard to governance of this particular track. You can see the roles of the advisory committee as well. Like I say, we kind of, in the governance committee, are looking at the advisory committee as a boots on the ground kind of activity with us. Go to the next slide, Mike. One of the first things that we took on was, what are we going to do? You know, there wasn't really a lot of guidance. There wasn't a lot of, this piece of property had kind of sat there for a while. And so the first thing we took on was trying to identify what priorities as a governance committee we had with regard to this tract of land. And 4 different priorities surfaced fairly quickly. We had to look at the whole branding situation in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, is it a park? Is it a nature preserve? What does the public think it is? How do we differentiate? And so branding and education ended up being the top priority that we wanted to take on right away with regard to the nature preserve. The second area was maintenance. This is a fairly sizable piece of property with very limited access capability and a set of rules which heavily limit the kinds of things that can happen in it. It's a preserve, it's not a park. And so the whole question of maintenance is going to be tackled by the governance committee. At the moment, the Park and Recreation, Center Region Park and Recreation maintenance staff is kind of looking after the preserve. They're not initiating major tasks. They're not directing, certain things be done. They're kind of just looking after it. They are making regular visits in terms of their staff, and when we need them to do something, they're doing some cleanup kinds of things when it's necessary, but they have no real formal assignment per se. But that's a priority area that we have to work with. The third area was the whole vegetative and forest management kind of thing. Because unlike a park in many ways, especially the parks that we have in this region, where there are a lot of amenities. There's field amenities, and there's bathroom amenities, and there's basketball amenities, and pickleball amenities. All of that is off the table, okay? This is a preserve. And the one thing we have to manage in this preserve is the actual purpose of the preserve, the vegetation and the forest. We know that we're going to have to look at those issues in the course of our role in governance. It's kind of interesting. I had a conversation a few weeks ago, and whenever we talk about parks and some of the ownership of land that you have and so on, there's always concern about invasive species. And we have to get rid of the invasive species. Well, there's one side of this nature preserve that says invasive species which are there may be an educational event, as opposed to we got to get rid of them. So there'll be a discussion about things like that when we look at the whole issue of forest management and vegetation. We also need to look at the condition of the trees, especially the condition of the trees in and around the pathways that we have, the walking paths and the bikeways, and we'll have to look at things like that. And the fourth area is enforcement. And we've not had a lot of discussion about this, but boy, is it tricky. How are we going to handle the enforcement of the preserve requirements and regulations and the increased use on the part of the public in terms of this kind of a facility? And so, while we haven't really had a discussion about that, we feel that that is a piece that needs to be resolved with regard to the dual ownership, both you guys and Borough Council. One of the things that we think needs to happen fairly soon is establishing some kind of official public point of contact. We don't really have that. College Township has very graciously provided a fair amount of the leadership in terms of this whole process and this piece and where we go from here and how we do it. And I've got to tell you folks that Mike on your staff has been very, very helpful to us and works closely with me as chair in terms of working on agendas and trying to get some kind of organizational environment for this task. But ultimately, we're going to have to establish at some point an official public point of contact. Somebody has a complaint, somebody likes something, somebody'd like to suggest something, any of those kinds of things. We've got to publicly have that person or entity to take that information. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to work on fairly soon in order to move forward. I will say also, with regard to the branding and education, we've already started doing some things there. We have agreed that we do need to establish some kind of web presence to this particular natural feature. And staff, both Mike and Jasmine Fields from the borough, they're the two staff people that we're working with in the two locations, have been working on this particular web presence. It is not up and running, but we are looking at how we want that web presence to happen. The second thing is signage. And we feel very strongly that educational signage is going to be an important part of how we manage the public as they work through and move through this particular track. And with that in mind, Jasmine from the borough has already contacted the Penn State sustainability students. And in fact, I think on Monday I have a web meeting with that group to talk about some ideas and having them develop some ideas that we might use in terms of signage for this particular track. Go to the last slide then, Mike. Homework. It's important to us that we, in our work in governance, not go in a direction that is unacceptable to the leadership in both the borough and the College Township, both with regard to your councils as well as your staffs. Our time is just as important as yours is, and we just do not want to go down paths that are unacceptable in the end. So with that in mind, we need to get an idea of what your vision is for this particular tract of land in the region. we have the full gamut of do nothing more than currently exists. End of story. Just whatever's there is there. However we do it, we do it. All the way to the other side of the spectrum, which you all are familiar with, in terms of a Millbrook Marsh type facility. So somewhere in between, the municipalities and the staffs and the governance group need to meet. And so in the way of homework, and I'll get to this at the end, but in the way of homework, that's one of the things that we're going to start to try and zero in on, is what is the vision for this particular track. The second thing is, how do we budget the work that is going to need to be done to fund whatever the vision is? College Township has already established a line item in your budget, and I believe there's a $2,500 figure in it, or something thereabouts.
CIP.
So, you know, that's a start. The borough has not done anything likewise, but as a result of this communication and my meeting with them, it is my hope that in this budget cycle, that they will establish some avenue for funding. Do we know how much any of this is going to cost? No, because we don't know what any of this really is. So the sense of $2,500 each and a pot of $5,000, if we need to get somebody in there to do something, we know that we can pay them to do it. If it has to do with maintenance, if it has to do with something else, if it has to do with the nature of our web presence and so on, and we need to fund a little something, we can do that. So we're okay there for right now, but I'm nowhere near a position where I can say to you, your capital improvement process needs to have X number of $1,000 in it. And then the question of who will implement the work and that is going to be done on the priorities and the vision. So this is the homework we need help with from the electeds. Couple of ways I feel we can attack this. One is we might have a joint work session, whether it be all of you or designated at least 2 of you from each group, along with staff representatives, decision-making staff representatives from each entity, along with us, to sit down and talk about where we want this to go and walk away with some consensus at that point that we can present to everybody. And that's one way of doing that in terms of your homework. Or another way of doing this is that possibly through some questionnaires that we would send to each of those same bodies, asking pointed questions for you to at least write down your thoughts, and for us then to kind of put them together. Are we all on the same page? Are we on so many different pages that this will never work? Where are we to get that? So that may be a first little step before maybe a joint work session that we might ask that you participate in. But we need to have that information before we go too far. Right now, 2 things are on our plate that I don't feel we need to have a great deal of direction from you. One is the web presence kind of thing. The other is looking at entry point signage. There are 1 larger entry point to this property and 2 smaller ones that the public can access the land. And so we're going to start to look at what do we need to tell the people who are coming into this preserve about the preserve and how it functions. And we're moving ahead with that discussion as well. So thank you for time. If any of you have any questions, be happy to try and answer them. But I've got to tell you, my learning curve on this project is like this. This is not something I had on my radar in terms of the township. So I have been trying to do my homework. Fortunately, I've got Adam and Mike here with me, and they have some of that history. But any questions or any comments?
All right, we'll start from right to left. We'll start with Eric, council. Staff, have anything to add before we go on?
I'll just chime in real quick. We've been very fortunate with Bill's, despite the steep learning curve, his leadership has been excellent. He showed the names on the board there of who's on each of the committees, and since we're in baseball season, I'll say we've got a lineup of all of our cleanup hitters there. There's a lot of folks there and a lot of power coming to the plate for this discussion. But to Bill's point, as we've discussed this at length over a series of meetings, and bear in mind, these groups have really only been meeting since April. I think governance has met on 5 occasions at this point, and the advisory committee is at 2 or 3. That first question of the vision is the one that keeps coming to the top of the list, because that begets everything else that then follows. Is this group has quickly gone through that spectrum of opportunities associated with the preserve, but really need that guidance from the elected body to say, this is what we want you to focus in on, and here's how we're willing to put resources towards it. So I want to share the appreciation to Bill for all his efforts, and I'm going to tag along with Bill to the borough so we can see this again and try to grab the info that we get from both bodies and start filtering that down.
Well, Bill, thanks for an excellent presentation. So we'll start out with Eric on questions for Mr. Keogh or comments.
Yeah. Did this presentation just become available right before the meeting? Okay. Because
It's not in the packet.
yeah, to Mike's comment, gather information. It's kind of hard to see something and then provide guidance at the same time. I'm assuming the expectation is we're going to noodle on this for a while and then get back.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair, Eric. Yeah, we know we were kind of putting you in a box here tonight. So
Yeah.
Those open-ended questions are really for you to, as Bill framed it, homework, take away, and let's think about it a little bit and bring that back to us. And what other form you prefer. If it's a questionnaire, we can certainly do that.
My only comment is that I think we ought to do it, but I don't think it's fair to ask us to start discussing or debating those things tonight, having just seen this. So that's all I had.
Rich?
No, the same feeling. I wasn't planning on making any decisions tonight, but I think it's equally important that you gave the feedback from the borough as well, and then I think between the bodies, between the smart folks in the room, they'll figure out a path for us.
Well, and very honestly, I started having the conversation with Mike and Jasmine early on that I wanted to keep both councils in the loop all the way along. I wanted no surprises for councils. And so, yeah, don't feel pressured to make any answers tonight, but certainly be aware of the questions that are out there that are going to have to be resolved one way or another.
Good. All right. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that no surprises thing. I'm in support of the work session in any way, shape, or form we do it. Quite frankly, it kind of occurred to me that maybe the questionnaires and the session are both good ideas, one preceding the other. Just some food for thought. I had a question to you, Bill. Are there actually printed rules and regulations for Thompson Woods?
Yes.
That I'm not aware of?
Yes.
Where do they live?
Well, they live in a couple of different documents. One of the documents they live in is part of the original establishment of this piece of land. And then in the agreement between the borough and the College Township Council or staffs, they're all there as well. A little bit more of an upgrade in the words used to describe the different requirements, but there are 15?
Yeah, you're talking about the covenants?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the rules that govern Thompson Woods Preserve were basically embedded at the time that the property was acquired. And those covenants were placed by the previous property owner, which are really, in essence, many of the rules of the road as far as Thompson Woods Preserve is concerned. And just quick example, identification of which paths are bike paths. There are a variety of different trails and paths that exist at Thompson Woods Preserve, but there's only one designated bike route through Thompson Woods Preserve. And so that creates challenges in managing and in signage and just general education for that. But those actually exist, and the committees, I believe both governance and advisory, have access to those. This facility is also governed by our rules and regulations for parks as well, and those exist in ordinance form, and we have modified those from time to time over the years as well.
Yeah.
So it's really governed in a couple of different
You did
places.
a great segue to my next point, right? And now my next question, right? Is there a need, and that does not need to be an answer, it's an open-ended question. Is there a need then, right? We talked about the branding of a preserve versus a park. Is there a need for us to update our ordinances? And I don't know about the borough's ordinances, maybe they need the same thing to kind of distinctly say, here's a preserve, right? I do believe that some, I think, some of our neighboring townships, Ferguson and Patton, do have specific ordinances that apply to preserved lands versus parkland. So, that's just one thing I had there. And along that line with the borough, I'd be interested, and maybe you can take this question to them, the branding, how does that relate to the park that abuts right up against it, which is Walnut Springs, right? That they call a park and not a preserve. So, yeah, just the food for thought there, but thank you, yeah.
You are now entering, as a sign, a preserve.
Yeah.
Certainly those kinds of things represent some of the challenges, and looking at the issue of the signage and how that educational and signage piece operates in order to manage the preserve itself.
Okay.
I will also say that based on my reading of the documents, we've got two parties that have a say in anything that we might want to change or at least butt up against, and that is Clearwater Conservancy and DCNR, because they were both parties in what was the transfer of this property into the existing environment. So it's not just ours.
Right.
It's a whole other group that have some say.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
Well, thank you, first of all, for your presentation. It was helpful to get the history. I remember hearing about this, but I don't know the history well. I do favor the idea of a questionnaire, and certainly some of the, having the documents, understanding the covenants, and I can certainly find an ordinance, but the agreement, the intermunicipal agreement that we made this year. And thank you for your time and your commitment to this work. I appreciate that. So, yeah, so doing the questionnaire and then the work session makes good sense to me. So I didn't really have any homework. You made the suggestion. I agree.
just for your own information, I've just retired from 40 years of being an umpire. And I was walking around with all of this free time on my hands and said, you know, gee whiz, I need to find something to do. and so the opportunity to have this come on my plate at my age is a little bit exciting. Plus, I must say I've always enjoyed working with staff from College Township, even though I come from an outlying area.
Who shall remain nameless?
Oh,
Well, thank you for that.
Anthony.
No, I just want to echo Bill, outstanding presentation to give us the history and how it progressed to where we are today, and opening up the discussion of what can be done there or cannot be done there, and how we can enjoy it as a community. So I think the homework that you're giving and having maybe a roundtable discussion is the path to go. Thank you.
I will also say, and Mike and I have discussed this, this is not a horse race to get to the end of whatever is going to evolve. I want to keep it moving forward, but on the other hand, I feel that it needs to be paced because it is involving 2 municipalities and 2 sets of elected officials and a group of covenants and the public's use of this. So there are a bunch of things that need to be what ifs in the course of the process of this. But I do want to keep us moving forward, but not at a pace that is not going to lead to a good end result. What am I saying? That may outlive me.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, on to our next Local Traffic Advisory Committee, Mr. Hartzell.
Unlike Bill, I'm not going to ask for any money tonight. Maybe in the future at some point. It's appropriate I happen to be standing next to the Center Hills community map here. I'm Don Hartzell. I'm chair of the Local Traffic Advisory Committee, and this is my annual presentation as an ABC to the College Township Council. The LTAC was formed in 2000, so we've been around 23 years now, appointed by you all, the council, to coordinate requests remanded by you to study traffic situations in the township and recommend cost-effective traffic calming devices for your adoption where warranted. Our current members consist of 4 citizens, myself, Dr. Ron Smith, who's the vice chair, Earl Moore, who's online, and Pat Vernon. We're also the council rep is Susan Trainer, township engineer Don Franson, the township public works director Amy Kerner, and 5 ex officio members, the State College Police Department, Center Lifelink, Alpha Fire Company, State College Area School District, and the Center Region Planning Agency. LTAC follows a 4-step process outlined in the College Township Traffic Calming Study and Approval Process Guidelines booklet, which the LTAC developed and most recently updated in August of 2017. Our study and approval process closely follows the guidance published in the PennDOT Traffic Calming Handbook and is adapted for local roadways. Both of these documents are posted to the College Township website under LTAC. This process from inception through actual funding and construction of the agreed upon solution can take 2 years or longer. Our most recent traffic calming project was the Center Hills Village. I believe this was a textbook example of applying our process to a neighborhood of 140 property owners seeking to reduce current and future cut-through traffic and speed through this neighborhood. The neighborhood formed a traffic calming committee, which was instrumental in guiding property owners through the process and achieving a consensus on an effective solution. This committee was ably guided by two key individuals, Don Franson and Nicholas Schaefer from Trans Associates. The resulting solution, which council approved, resulted in the installation of 7 Watts speed humps each on Oak Ridge and Shamrock Avenues at a cost of just over $100,000. Watt speed humps are documented to reduce speeds up to 8 miles per hour at the hump and cut through traffic up to 18%. This is the first use of speed humps in College Township. And I will say, as a side, we had a discussion. I'm also on the Water Authority. In our engineer meeting, we discussed, because we have a member on our engineer committee who's very involved with the Alpha Fire Department. You know, there was a major fire on Oak Ridge Avenue about a week ago, and we've heard no negative feedback from the fire department with their having to negotiate all the speed humps. In fact, the first responders was an all-female crew from downstairs. It had to go up Squirrel Drive and down most of the 7 speed humps. And I haven't heard anything negative about that. You know, we include the Alpha Fire Department in our discussions and all. So it seemed they're aware of the humps. They took them in stride, maybe slowed down their response 20 or 30 seconds. But and we haven't heard any problems with that. A review of the effects of these speed humps on speed and traffic volume will be conducted in the August-September 2024 timeframe. My unscientific canvassing of several neighbors in the Center Hill Village has been very positive. Most have noticed a reduction in speed. However, with the opening of the 651-bed Aspen State College student housing complex, further analysis will be necessary to determine how much the speed humps have deterred cut-through traffic. It's going to be a tough analysis to do, going from pre-Aspen College to State College to post-Aspen State College. And with that, I'm open to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Don. Great presentation. Rich, questions, comments?
No, absolutely. You've been active. That hasn't always been the case, but
Yeah.
it sounds like we got a...
This is our only the third time that we did. The first one was in 2000, was a First Avenue project, and that never reached a consensus of the neighborhood, so it did not come to fulfillment. And then about 6 years ago now, we worked on Clover Road, and that was a resounding success.
Yes.
We've had no negative feedback since then, and it's certainly just about eliminated cut-through traffic.
It accomplished its mission.
Yes.
And towards that, I'm curious if you've gotten any data back on counts or speeds or anything in the Center Hills Village.
Well, actually, we did do an informal count, and I'd like to just point out that the difference between when Nick Schaefer throws out his tubes across the road and with our signs that are electronic, the data is apples and oranges. But what we're seeing was several hundred less vehicles a day, and the speed on both directions on, I think, both roads is now under 25.
Super. I mean, that's
But
similar.
that will be verified by the council, as Don mentioned, August, September of next year.
Great. But that's a follow-up to Lamont, and we saw success in the goals for that, so, I mean, let's keep it going. I found an interesting thing. I travel Hamilton Avenue in the borough a lot, and it was interesting to see the difference in striping of the humps in Center Hills Village versus Hamilton. I think the ones in Center Hills Village are much better and everything. So, but yeah, good stuff. Thanks for leading the fight.
Yeah, I think the solution we came up with for the money, so a little over $100,000, is most effective. And it's what Nicholas Schaefer recommended.
That's why we asked the smart
Good
guys.
decision.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Susan?
No, I do want to say thank you for your leadership on the project. I came to it quite late, but I did come to it during the time when we were canvassing the neighborhood and doing the votes, and there was a little guidance that was needed there at that time. So I appreciated that as the first experience, and thank you. And thank the rest of the committee.
Thank you for your membership.
Anthony?
No, thank you. And you answered the question that I had with reference to the home that was on fire and public safety. So that's good news. Thank you.
Eric?
No, thanks, Don. I was really happy to hear the EMS experience, or the Alpha experience, because you recall that came up in our debate. And then I just want to tell you how much I appreciate LTAC's efforts. You noted Clover Road? Yeah. And now Oak Ridge. The LTAC doesn't get called on very often.
No.
But when they do, it's almost always a high-profile, sometimes contentious challenge. So I applaud you. I think, did you say Earl was on that committee too?
Yes.
Yeah, and since he's online, I just want to express my gratitude for, taking that on. It's not too many people who would jump into that fire.
I was surprised the fact that, and you rightfully so, what your remand to us was that whatever we do on Oak Ridge Avenue, we also have to do on Shamrock. And you think about that, you only have about 40 residents on Oak Ridge and 30-some on Shamrock. And those people really aren't affected by what you do on Oak Ridge, but they had to be affected. They had to be involved, and they had to agree to it, or the whole thing would have fallen apart. And they did. And even the people on Cottonwood and a few homes on Squirrel Drive, we had close to 80% positive, vote on it. It's amazed it went that well.
I appreciate your perseverance, because I think without it, we wouldn't have got to this positive outcome.
Well, I think that neighborhood committee, which Eric Silver and Tom Ertzgard were chaired at different times, that was very frustrating for them. They probably were taking blood pressure medicine before that was all over.
I extend my appreciation to them also.
Okay. Staff, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, I did actually reach out to Sean Kaufman and ask him, and he's verified what you're saying, Don, is he said that the crews noted that the humps were well marked and they didn't have any issues with them.
Okay.
Now the next thing, we'll see how our snow plows do,
Yeah.
since these are the first speed humps in College Township.
We can see what our snowplow drivers have to say.
Yeah.
Somebody else can ask them, I'm not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think you'll have to ask him, honestly.
You'll hear from them.
I was gonna say, Don, what is your phone number, by the way?
Most of them know where I live, so I may get a lot of snow dumped.
Yeah, you might get all the snow, David.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Don. Okay, moving on to the manager's update and reports.
I really have nothing substantial to add to the report. The only thing of particular substance, and Mike, I'm going to ask you if you wanted to make any comments. There was finally a solar power purchase agreement conversation, and I didn't know if you wanted to share any of your takeaways from that with council, but I really have nothing else to add to the report.
I understand that the management group also came to General Forum and offered a presentation. We saw a very similar presentation to what General Forum had seen. The committee is starting to show its frustration in terms of the process. And quite honestly, that's everybody around the table, including the school district, who's really the lead on this, that it's taking as long as it has. One of the things that the school district continues to persevere with is the legal review, which has become quite expensive. And they continue to chip away. They feel like they're getting close, but they also recognize this is becoming a burden for a lot of the members. And we're at a decision point in terms of continuing to fund the legal review. So they have asked that at some point here in the near future, the members do express their intent if they're intending to withdraw. We have had the Center County Refuse and Recycling Authority did at the meeting formally announce their withdrawal from the group, and State College Borough Water Authority also noted that they will be making a determination here in October. They had a lot of rather significant and pointed questions for the group, and like I said, it's at this point, Adam had framed it at one point that there was some waning in terms of the interest of the parties, and that continues to carry forward. So it was a meeting as you probably would have expected based on what you heard at General Forum. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, and the costs continue to mount.
The only other piece of relevant information that I think that the council needs to be aware of, Mike, and we're aware that this time last year we were in this process, and our contracts that we had for energy providers came due. We renewed at that time for a 12-month period, for a 1-year period. We are, is it November, Mike?
End of November, yeah.
End of November, we're going to be reaching that same point. And I personally don't believe that we're going to be at a point with this conversation to know what direction ultimately this is going to be taking. So we're going to be faced with yet another renewal. And now the question becomes, and certainly it's a bigger question for the College Township Water Authority, in recognition that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but energy prices have fallen off some of the peaks that we were seeing even a year ago. And now you can lock in for a year or 2 years or 3 years at a substantially reduced rate. And for operating authorities, like State College Borough Water Authority, College Township Water Authority, possibly Center County Refuse and Recycling, they may be just too attractive to avoid, given what appears to be the degree of uncertainty surrounding the proposal.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, the end of November is when the contract, our existing contract, does run out for both the township and the water authority. Last year when we renewed, we got a pretty good rate for the time because there was a quick dip in the market that we took advantage of. And I want to say we were at 8.7 cents, something of that nature. Most recent numbers that I've seen, the market continues to kind of come to us. It may have hit its floor, and we're under 7. So it's a combination of a lot of factors at this point that you see all the members blinking a little bit in terms of what they're going to do. The market has started to gravitate back to them where they can lock in longer-term contracts. Energy providers have been able to themselves start to green up their energy and provide opportunities as well. So there's a lot that are contributing to this, but we are coming up on a decision point here pretty quick for the township and the water authority. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to lay that out in front of you.
And that, thanks, Mike.
Okay, questions for the manager and the assistant manager? Okay.
Hey, I have one.
Yeah.
The folks who've pulled out, the legal cost incurred so far, are they still split amongst all of the original partners, or do those slices of the pie, the remaining folks, just get bigger?
Yeah, the ones, the Refuse and Recycling Authority, I believe, said they would pay the next bill due for legal review, and then they were done. Borough Water Authority is still a question to see where they land. They are obviously one of the big players in this, so they're going to be that's a substantial date coming up. The other member that dropped out was CATA, and I think they were out before the legal review happened. So yeah, as members drop out, at some point that pie is going to get, sliced up a little differently, and each partner's share is going to get a little bigger.
Hopefully, the need for legal review will be diminishing, theoretically.
That's what we heard. That's what we heard at the COG General Forum presentation. I will say that both the township and the Water Authority have already paid those additional legal review fees. So what I'm hoping is there isn't a surcharge that comes back, some additional amount of money to capture any that might have pulled out that aren't covering those costs. But it's good to hear that the Refuse and Recycling has agreed to at least pay the most recent fees. I think where we're really going to get into problems is if there's yet additional funds being requested for legal review.
Yeah.
And we heard, at least I thought that I heard, that there was some potential for that. And I think that may be a real hard pass for some potential participants.
Well, let me just close by saying that I did follow up after General Forum when it was shared that CATA had dropped out, and they did drop out for the reasons you shared, that the other authorities are dropping out. Now, not everyone, you pick the amount, the percentage of your electricity that you want in. And I'm a little disappointed that instead they didn't say, well, we're just going to go to 10% or 20% so that you could make that symbolic gesture, because I think we all agreed that that was important. But it sounds to me, now hearing this, that the legal fees are split up no matter what percentage of electricity you intend to buy. Is that correct, or does it track?
It's proportionate.
It's proportionate.
Okay, so if you were to drop to 10% from 50%, theoretically, your legal fee slice, okay.
Yours drops and everybody else's increases.
Yeah, all right, we're getting into the weeds here, but I got that same answer from CATA that apparently the other authorities are heading to. But I will say on the record, I'm disappointed that those authorities aren't maintaining some percentage of their power, accessing some percentage of their power this way, at least, I think that's important. I think it's important symbolism moving forward. But I understand that if they're drowning in legal fees, they have that responsibility as an authority.
Okay. All right. Good. All right, let's move on then to COG Regional County and Liaison Reports. We do have a couple written reports that came in. There's also a couple other events that were attended this week. So we'll just go ahead down. We'll start with Anthony. Anything to add?
So I did attend the State of the County address for the chamber today. It was very informative. They just went through a presentation of a variety of things that are happening throughout the county. So, points of interest. They talked about the future plans for the old Center Crest. Portion of office building expansion. One of the things that I found interesting, they were talking about using maybe the second floor as housing, some type of housing, because right now they don't really have any housing for those in need, whether it's, we'll say troubled families, abusive families, and so forth. So I thought that was interesting. They touched on the progress with the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. And in this year alone, they got $840,000 in grants, the HVAB, Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. The success of the Ironman that came to the area, what they're looking to do with some of these other monies, and going from there. They talked about the use of the hotel tax, and how that, basically all ties into how all this money, we'll say these taxes and so forth, really does get put back into our community. So yeah, it was definitely positive to understand that the monies that we are putting out in taxes, or maybe these additional taxes that maybe we hear folks or see folks not understanding what's being done with it. They talked about the license, the $5, and again, how those monies are being used to certain areas and maintenance of bridges and so forth. But it was good in general.
Okay. Questions for Anthony? Comments? Okay. Susan?
I have no committee reports to give. I did attend the PSATS Regional Forum this week with Eric and Jen. I was able to attend a solar session. Actually, there was a broad discussion of hydrogen before we got into the solar discussion. And attended sessions on budgeting, which were very helpful for me as a new member of council. And an opportunity to see other people and network again with people from PSATS. I appreciate the regional forum and the boot camps that they've offered.
Okay.
Been very helpful.
Questions, comments for Susan? Okay, I did not have any meetings. My HR committee meeting was canceled due to lack of agenda items. Rich?
I had a couple meetings.
You did?
Yeah, you did.
Are you gonna speak to facilities?
No,
Okay.
I wasn't. I could fill in around.
Okay.
Rich sat in for me at facilities, so he got firsthand, he's got firsthand report.
Okay.
To a degree, it was all an executive session. So, but in general, the agenda showed that there's a potential opportunity to acquire the property adjoining the current COG building property. And that was evaluated by the members, and very good discussion and everything. At the end of it, we came back and recommended to the executive committee and general forum to pursue the opportunity. How that occurs was left to the executive committee on that three main options. The executive director is authorized to enter into a letter of intent, purchase agreement, whatever like that, and then we do the due diligence as part of that. And the thoughts with that is time. Time is money, money is time. And the other thought that the due diligence needs to be done before an offer is made, and then the Mike Bloom option of do nothing.
Ouch.
You get the credit. You get the credit. I brought it out. I gave you the credit.
Glad
It's
I'm
always an
known for
option.
doing nothing.
So Dustin's going to see this first at exec. I half suspect we'll see it at general forum. So we'll go for that. Finance committee, we had our first budget review session that consisted of the planning agency, refuse, and CCMPO, as well as fire and emergency management. I think we're all aware of fire. They're putting the stretcher on before we need more and more full-time paid fire folks. They're doing a great job with that. The capital of fire is getting expensive. And the lead times for fire trucks, you've seen it with the budget amendments and everything that's come through. Takes longer to get it, costs more to get it, all that. So that's factoring into the capital plan. Emergency management's pretty status quo. They need a new director in there, but they're working through that. Planning, refuse was very, it's an enterprise fund. It's paid by the fees, pretty standard. They're looking at, we saw the budget amendment to pay for refuse containers at the new park. They're looking at those type opportunities. Planning is having a little bit of a conundrum in that, we were the first that pulled out of local planning, and now Harris is reducing Patton is reducing their commitment and given notice that they're going to pull out in 2025, and then Harris is reviewing it currently about whether they're going to reduce and how much. So trying to put a budget together, and then you have an outgoing planning director is creating some challenges in that. Mm-hmm. And then there's the CCMPO. Mm-hmm. So as the CCMPO chair has briefed us, they're looking at trying to take opportunity of once in a generation funding streams and trying to maximize our opportunities in that. And I had forwarded the presentation that we received from the CCMPO. The way that they're looking at doing that is bringing in people, bringing in a staff and consultants to go after this pot of money. Mm-hmm. and everything. So this is one of those, philosophically, yeah, it makes complete sense. Then the dollars get attached to it, and you got to make a decision. So for that standpoint, I need some consensus from council on whether they support that large change in our CCMPO contribution and everything. Just a reminder that the CCMPO is also funded by the county, and the county's portion is on par with the center regions and everything. One thing that did get questioned.
When do you need that by?
Well, we're having a wrap up on the 17th.
Okay.
So I kind of need to have some guidance. I apologize that the short lead time, but didn't know the full dollar consequence of it till last week. So as soon as I knew, you knew. So then, Eric can speak best to the potential of that, and then obviously staff, I'm sure, has some thoughts. But we have our next review session on next Tuesday. And then again on the 12th, and again the wrap-up will be on the 17th. So far, so good. There's one of the problem is you got a lot of new faces involved in this, and we also gave them some kind of big decisions late in the game that factor into the budget and everything. But they're rolling with it. We'll keep working through it. Bob Long's a great asset to us for his insights, and we'll just keep moving on. But so far, other than the CCMPO large jump, it seems like everything's moving in a reasonable direction. But we also haven't done parks yet, so that was the one that derailed it last year. I don't think it'll derail it, but there's a lot of decisions that need to be made for that. So I don't know whether Eric wants to share anything on the CCMPO thoughts.
Suggestions for how to come to a consensus even too?
The quick comment, Ferguson was actually the first one to pull out of regional planning, not College.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well,
we started.
Local, nobody's pulled out of regional.
Yeah, no, regionals.
But I'm sorry, local, but they brought in their own in-house local planner while we still had, we were still using Center Region.
Right, and the borough had never participated.
Right.
Anyways, not that that really matters.
But we were 100%. We were the only 100%.
Right, we were we started the domino, I think, by pulling out 100%.
We took a
The
person
patent
out.
dropped to 50, and, yeah, like I said, I was with Susan on Tuesday, so Rich filled in, and the concept of the real estate issue was vetted first with the chair and the vice chair before we even decided it was on the agenda. And of course, I immediately reached out to our in-house real estate expert, to get his thoughts. And we said, hey, this certainly has enough merit on the surface to at least float it before the entire facilities committee. And then that's what happened in exec session last Tuesday. So on that subject, we have one more meeting before general forum. We should probably discuss that in exec session prior to our next meeting, so that going into general forum, we're prepared. I'm thinking that's how we should approach that. Maybe 6:30 exec session, if we could.
You're talking about the real estate?
I'm on the
real estate
facilities thing, not on
Facilities.
MPO yet. But
And just for clarity, the COG solicitor suggested that this be talked about in exec session too, so, although they kind of know we're looking at it, they don't know the details of our negotiating.
And having
stance.
said in the ethics section, very timely on Tuesday, yeah, I agree. I'm not the solicitor, but that one said,
Yep.
probably qualifies, because of course that was a sensitive subject. On the MPO, just two things really. The budget request is tied directly to the strategic plan. I mean, this is not just somebody in an office sitting down and saying, hey, I think we should throw a lot more money into the MPO. This came out of a very extensive, very deliberate, very collaborative strategic plan exercise with professional guidance from Michael Baker. What are we going to be? What are we going to do? It just so happened to coincide with this unprecedented opportunity for additional revenue. And then that takes me to my second point. That opportunity is a window. This is not, well, we're going to defer a $30,000 expense on sidewalks on Hauserville till next year and build them next year. This is not one of those.
Yeah.
This window closes. And as it's closing, other folks are receiving that money. So we're either in now or we're not. And this is this budget request is a very scaled back request from what actually came out of the strategic plan for what we thought we actually needed to take full advantage. It got scaled back to the bare minimum. If it's anything less than this, the feeling of the committee was it's not worth it. It's not worth the effort. So,
I mean, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we in a place where we can provide consensus this evening? Council, do you feel comfortable with that?
the number on that, I believe I floated 30,000. Was that about the incremental increase in College Township's budget?
Yeah,
right?
it's double our 23 budget.
I kind of hinted at that at the last meeting. So what we're talking about here from our standpoint, if you want to get away from the philosophical issue and just look at the budget numbers, it's about a $30,000 impact on our annual budget.
The only thing I would offer,
I think you wanted that consensus.
Not an additional 30,000.
I would prefer
30,000 total, right?
No, 60 instead of,
30. Okay, 60 instead of, rough numbers, 60 instead of 30.
it's the local share.
It's the local share. So I understand the philosophical and all that kind of stuff, and this is a poster child example for me of it's the same thing we ran into with the Parks strategic plan. Well, I got this plan, it says I should do this, doesn't mean I can afford it. I think those were your words last year. But then this also, can we afford not to do it? And And
There's
that's where.
there's some similarities here to the real estate.
Yeah,
question
yeah,
we're
and
gonna
this is,
face.
Yes.
this is kind of where I want to bet out right now is, I mean, I was thinking, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, manager, can we talk about this in an exec session, or do we need a special meeting to talk about the specifics of the CCMPO?
No, the CCMPO should be discussed here.
CCMPO needs to
In
be
here.
discussed here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are no issues with respect to the
And
conversation.
Well,
from a
yeah, and it's
timing
gotta be done,
standpoint,
it's gotta
I
be
need
done
guidance.
prior to our next meeting, because he needs it by the 17th.
CCMPO needs to be done prior to your next finance committee meeting.
Yeah,
Till the 17th meeting. roll up.
17th.
Yes.
The exec session on real estate prior to general forum.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I think I clouded that issue by overlapping the two. Didn't
Right.
mean
well,
to.
no, you didn't, but I'm failing to see the information, do we have the information that we need for the exec session on the real estate yet? All of it.
It's just some of
Go
it.
ahead, yeah, go ahead, Adam.
I was just gonna suggest, I think what you're dealing with are concepts,
Yeah,
excuse me. And I think those concepts are appropriate to be discussed in executive session relative to potential possible future acquisition of real estate. So in that regard, I don't know that there's a lot of additional materials, A, that would be available, or B, that you would need to have the kind of conversation, because a lot of it is going to be rooted in philosophy, and some future planning, but all of it is surrounded around the issue of real estate negotiation, and you need to have those conversations in executive session.
And I think we can get it done.
There
before
will
the
be
next
some
meeting.
additional information available for the exec session. There'll be some docs with some numbers.
go,
That's
so,
actually in the agenda, which is in a
Yeah.
little irony there, but.
okay.
So for that, the CCMPO, we kind of need to hash it out tonight
Yeah.
and talk about it. Eric's given us a heads up that this was coming for several months
Yeah.
and everything. And now we know what the price tag of it is. And it's just, do we see the value in it or
Yeah.
not? And does the manager think we can fit it into the budget?
Yeah, well, let's get that, a quick analysis off the hip.
Okay. From the, what is it, 30,000 foot
Yeah.
level here?
Well, that is also the
$30,000 foot level?
number,
Yeah, $30,000 foot level.
Yeah.
Let me just say that I believe that we're going to have a challenging 2024 budget year. That said, I look at this as being a little bit different because of the opportunity to leverage. Yes, these are things that came out of strategic plan, but it's a strategic plan with this very strategic focus and timeframe. And as a result of that, I don't see how you can ignore that.
It's a strategic plan that reaps us benefits in the monetary value.
Potential.
Potentially, absolutely. The strategic plan that we dealt with last year with respect to parks, yes, that in theory reaps benefits over time, and that's understood. But there is not the same degree of urgency this year with the strategic plan out of CCMPO. It's a different sense of urgency. And I think it would be a failure if we didn't actively participate in the CCMPO request. That said, knowing that $30,000 is a component of what will ultimately become a challenging budget year for 2024. So knowing that going in, I think, and again, not all, we're just in the early stages, okay? This is kind of just a bit of a guesstimate at this point, but I will say that revenues have been very good. There's been a lot of activity. It may not be as difficult as what I am anticipating, but in terms of this specific request, I don't really see how you can't try to pursue it.
Okay. Thanks,
So if I could offer, a big difference between the parks strategic plan and stuff is hey, let's spend more money, you know, with no pot of money on the other side of it. This one, there's a pot of money out there.
Spend money to get money. Yeah.
But, I mean, it's the potential of, there's no
Yeah.
guarantees.
And that needs to be noted, and on top of that, that doesn't mean we're gonna get a bunch of stuff in College Township.
Do we get reimbursed if it fails? No?
This is not like the $8 million lottery ticket we bought for I-99 that we
Okay.
don't pay if we don't win.
Right,
No, we're in it, but to Adam's point, the bill legislation has expiration date.
Yeah.
And should it not be renewed, we can scale back, and, you know, the concern was, well, half of that money goes to consulting, which you just turn the switch off. The other half goes to staff person. But no one, and you guys have seen this, there's been enough attrition over the years, Center Region Planning Agency, that I don't think anybody is, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, Mark, we just lost Mark both, you know, that we're not really concerned about that,
Okay.
about should we bring some help on, and in 3 years, you have to cut them
Okay.
loose. I don't, it's all nearly impossible given history, so.
That was a
anyways.
question I had about that position, was that funding that position, if, for example, we don't get the funding, the legislation will change, how is that a limited expense over time? If the purpose is to bring in money from money that's available for a short period of time, but
Yeah.
what you're saying is
A valid
attrition may.
concern.
Yeah, and that was my main concern,
But
but
none
attrition is.
of the staff at Center Region Planning Agency is too worried about that, and you can see why. I mean, they're constantly trying to fill positions there.
That was actually
Okay.
a big discussion.
It's a fair question.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, I made a comment of, you know, that Patton is looking at pulling out, and they're gonna hire a planner after we just got done talking about how difficult it is to hire a planner for Center Region.
Right.
So, you know, it kind of snowballs in there. With that said, the position that's being considered has a different skill set package
Right.
than a pure planner.
Right.
And so that will open up some opportunities. And then on that, the vision that I heard was that this individual would be a resource available to the municipalities, to the members of the MPO. And so, you know, like our Path to Campus, you know, they could assist us in that and work through that and everything. So there is some other benefits, and you nail one project, you nail the Path to Campus, that person's salary is paid for a while and everything. So, you know, I think Eric's absolutely in support of it. I would offer that I'm in support of it.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start with you guys because I think he's a yes, right?
Yeah, I've been trying to sell the rest of you on this for months.
Yeah. So go ahead, Rich, you're in support.
No, I'm in support of it,
Yeah.
and it's a limited window. The only thing I would offer, what I'm gonna push back on, is they have a full year's worth of funding in there. It's gonna take them 3-4 months minimum to get up to speed, and so we need to throttle.
In-house.
We need to throttle the money for staff position and stuff, and I will share something that's come up that's very interesting in the budget discussions, the philosophical of smoothing versus peaks and valleys and everything. And seems to be a growing consensus about leaving the money in the municipalities' pockets, similar to College Township is about their taxpayers, you know, leaving it in the taxpayers' pockets as long as possible. Similar at the COG, leave it in the municipalities' pockets, not just have it sitting over there, sitting in COG. So we're working towards that. So I think this kind of goes in the suggestion that we need to look at, you know, like when is a realistic execution of this plan will be part of the discussion on the 17th.
So conditional support, potentially conditional support.
No, I'd say full support, but just modification, just a little bit of
I
tweak.
think the contracted help could be ramped up pretty quick. It's the in-house staff, and you're right, I mean, it's,
Well, yeah, but if you don't have that in-house staff to focus that, and then, oh, by the way, they're short people already, so you've got the consultants coming in and.
Okay, so we got
who's
2
leading?
support. Anthony, questions, and if you're ready to give a yay or a nay.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously talked about, this doesn't really change. I mean, I was in support of it when we saw COG come in with the strategic plan and the CCMPO, and then also having a planner and a consultant. We're going after a lot of ARC money, I take it, it's still out there.
Bill.
Bill.
The infrastructure.
I mean, it makes sense.
On a fun note, the CCMPO folks are the biggest acronym throwers of anybody in the county. I had just to keep stopping them, it's like, for the common folk.
Oh, I was really happy to see it, the acronym defined within the presentation.
need a glossary.
Yes, yes.
That was nice.
Short answer, yes.
Susan?
Short answer, yes. Thank you for answering the question about attrition. That was a concern, that would be an ongoing expense year over year with a change in the definition of what that person would do. The contracted work seems to make great sense, and what you're saying is it's a bit of a gamble, at least initially, but long-term, there'll be availability to the municipalities for help. So, this will be my first budget cycle, so, assessing a 100% increase in one of our expenses is a challenge, but I look to you to give me context, and you did a nice job tonight, so thank you all.
All right, and I would just add that I did learn that bill stands for bipartisan infrastructure law, and there's not 2 L's. I remember when it was first thrown out there, I was like, what's he saying, bill legislation? Like the bill is, yeah. But, no, yes, I support, thank you.
Cool.
All right, good.
That's
We got
the guidance
through
I
that.
needed, thank you. Did I have another? Oh, I did.
Oh, yeah, Parks and Rec, go.
Wow.
Remember that whole day?
Oh,
that you
yeah,
lost?
yeah, that one. Yeah, so we had another session with our facilitator. We put up a matrix, and we worked through that, and we reached some consensuses to the point that we're gonna try to go without a net next month and see how we are, and see if that goes successfully, we should have something to bring to the general forum in November. So.
Okay. Questions for Rich after that very lengthy report?
It was combined report.
Combined report, that's right, yeah. Okay.
My day job misses me.
We're going to move on to staff, PC, and other committee reports. Mr. Hoffman, are you you still here?
Still awake,
Okay,
no report,
Okay.
no agenda, no
Okay.
report.
thank you. Staff, anything else?
Nothing to add.
Okay. DEIB reports.
Sure. Handful of things. October's a busy month in the realm of DEIB. A couple events to note. Latin Fest Saturday downtown. Upcoming Dignity Day. Don't have the date written, but Tuesday, and it's at the Martin Luther King Plaza downtown, which also ties back to a resolution that is in your consent agenda. I just wanted to call that to your attention, dealing with Global Dignity Day. In addition, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, Filipino American Heritage Month, German American Heritage Month, Italian American Heritage Month, and Polish American Heritage Month.
All in the same month.
All in the same month.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Anything to add into that, anybody? Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to this evening's consent agenda. It consists of the following. CA1, minutes approval of, letter A is September 21st, 2023, public hearing on ordinance O-23-03, the official map. Letter B is September 21st, 2023, public hearing on ordinance O-23-08, fireworks. And letter C is September 21st, 2023, regular meeting minutes. CA2 is correspondence and receipt/approval of the following. Letter A is an email from Deb Nardone dated September 21st, 2023 regarding a resignation as Executive Director of Clearwater Conservancy. B is a letter from Ratu, is that correct? Dated September 26, 2023 regarding time extension request for UAJA Biosolids Upgrade Project to January 16th, 2024. C is the First Night State College 2024 request for sponsorship of an ice sculpture. D is an email from Steve Allison dated September 29th, 2023 regarding a resignation from the CTIDA. And E is a letter from the College Township Water Authority dated September 25th, 2023 regarding the College Township Water Authority notice of application for the Spring Creek Park Well 1. F is an email from Frank Malott dated September 29th, 2023 regarding fireworks. G is an email from Dawn and Renee Marks dated October 1st, 2023 regarding fireworks. And H is an email/letter from Mike Bloom dated October 2nd, 2023 regarding the fireworks. CA3 are action items and approval of the following. A is the termination of the CTIDA/College Township agreement for Township Manager as the interim Executive Director of the College Township Industrial Development Authority. B is a resolution R-23-23 recognizing October as Community Planning Month. And C is resolution R-23-24 for recognizing October 18th as a Global Dignity Day in 2023. Do any members of council wish to pull any of these items?
I would like to pull CA2H.
2H?
2H. Anything else? Rich? I'd like to pull CA2C and CA3A. I just have a question on that, for clarification. Anything else? So I'll accept the motion to approve the consent agenda minus CA2C, H, and CA3A.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No one opposed. Okay, go ahead. Susie, you can start out.
The reason I want to bring this up, I know that we've had correspondence in the email, but I did want to point out that staff did a remarkable job dealing with a particular neighborhood concern regarding fireworks that were set off last week, and took the opportunity to create an educational opportunity for the neighborhood, which may also be extended to other areas in the township. And this was just a short period of time after we had made changes to the ordinance, so it was very timely. But I really did want to take the opportunity to thank the staff on record for the work that was done. It was my neighborhood, and it was a potentially very divisive situation, but because of the timeliness and the way the situation was handled, what could have become much more of a contentious situation was handled very quickly. And for the most part, the residents that I've heard from completely the residents that I've heard from in my neighborhood were all very, very pleased and very respectful of how it was handled by township staff. And really appreciate the way the ordinance went very quickly from an ordinance that had been changed into, something that we could put to work right away. So.
Okay.
It's on record now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up. I was attending the ICMA annual conference out of state. I was not around, and I want to specifically thank both Mike and Mark for their very diligent response in dealing with the issues that had arisen there. So they did a great job. Well done.
I agree with that. I mean, that was how to handle a situation 101. I mean, the response was timely. It was appropriate. It clearly articulated the rules and what expectations were. I mean, all in a 24-hour period? Pretty impressive.
I believe that the first notification that we had was Friday evening. I think by Monday afternoon, things had been addressed.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, addressed to the satisfaction of the neighborhood as well.
Nice, okay. So CA2C, I guess my question arises, we've done this in the past, right? Donated for an ice sculpture?
That's correct,
We
yeah.
usually do it annually?
We do.
And
We
that's well within your purview to approve that amount of,
Well, it is, but in the event that there were any modifications to, maybe we just didn't want to sponsor a sculpture, wanted to maybe make a donation instead,
Okay.
or something to that effect. We do have a line item in the budget that that this is directed to, but typically I usually bring these requests forward only so if there's any type of modification, we can capture that.
okay. Does anybody wish to, I don't wish to modify it, I just wanted to bring it up. Okay. And then CA3A, so I was a little confused in going over this. Is the intent to just to include the original agreement, not amend it, but just for, so then essentially we would just approve the termination of that agreement?
Yeah, this is I believe that this is the most current signatured version of the agreement that was in place between the township and the IDA. And by action tonight, you're simply just bringing the entirety of that agreement to a termination.
Okay, and there's nothing we have to amend for a closure signature or anything like that?
There's not.
Okay. That was my only question.
The document contains cancellation terms.
Well, that's kind of why I asked, because I was like, I'm not sure it's blatant to me.
Well, the document itself
It,
has a,
it extended it to,
well, count by action at this meeting, you extended the manager's participation through the end of this calendar year. And while that may not necessarily be reflected in the language here, that was captured in the minutes. And essentially, the request here this evening is simply, given the fact that there's no longer a need for those services, given that there is now an executive director that has been hired and is in place, that there's no longer a use for the agreement, and we're just bringing to termination. So while it is
So
somewhat...
termination effective this evening?
This evening.
Okay. 5th of October. Okay. Anybody have any further questions? I accept the motion to approve these 3 items too.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, none opposed. We are moving on now to old business. Old business number 1, workforce housing ordinance intent statement discussion. Lindsay.
All right. Thank you. So back in August, on the 17th, staff presented a memo to council outlining some of the successful aspects and some things that need improvement regarding the workforce housing ordinance, which is section 238.4 of our zoning ordinance. One issue that was identified was the lack of the intent and purpose statement. So council directed staff to prepare one of those, and we did tonight. So I'm just going to go through what we drafted as the purpose and then read through some of the intent statements, and we can have a discussion afterwards if you so choose. So the purpose of the workforce housing ordinance is to guarantee housing affordability within College Township. And affordability is defined by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And then we get into the intent. So the first one is to facilitate the provision of affordable and attainable rental and owner-occupied workforce housing options within College Township. So that would be sort of like streamlining the process or taking actions to simplify any process. Second is to foster collaborative efforts with neighboring municipalities to establish regional consistency in workforce housing ordinances. And I can say that we do have a meeting coming up here with some other folks in the region to talk about this topic specifically. Number 3, continuously monitor the Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, Area Median Income, or AMI, adjusting the AMI thresholds in the ordinance to accommodate any annual increases that HUD or decreases that HUD may make. Number 4, to ensure housing opportunities are both affordable and attainable for local workforce. Number 5, safeguard workforce housing options within the community, enabling individuals and families with moderate to middle incomes to reside proximate to their workplaces. Number 6, recognize the importance of socioeconomic diversity in nurturing more inclusive and dynamic neighborhoods. Number 7, promote private sector investments in affordable housing through partnerships between local government and private developers aimed at constructing affordable housing units. Number 8, implement incentives to stimulate the creation and maintenance of workforce housing. Number 9, place a strong emphasis on crafting sustainable, enduring solutions to housing challenges, including the imposition of long-term affordability requirements. And number 10, strive to bridge the disparity between the housing needs of local employees and the existing housing options, ensuring that workers can afford to reside in the communities where they are gainfully employed. I think by that one, we're trying to, capture the missing middle there. So this is what staff prepared for your review and acceptance. And if you do agree with the proposed intent, I think the next step would be to remand it to the Planning Commission for their opportunity to review. The next step, I guess, for me would be to start making changes to the ordinance that are consistent with the intent statement.
Okay. All right, let's start out with you, Susan. Discussion on purpose and intent, and then thoughts on remand as well.
I actually have an esoteric question about the purpose. Looking at it from sort of that 30,000-foot view and thinking about a comprehensive plan in the future, is a purpose statement a place where you might reference something like the mission, the vision, the values, and the goals statements that we've made as a township? And how would that impact, is the purpose the place to do that? One of the things I'm very aware of is there's language in all of this, and the more language we add to things, the more we constrain ourselves, or the more we open it up to interpretation as various people, developers, township. But in terms of looking at a, sort of a comprehensive plan over time, or, as we harken back to that, and then, or do we add something like, the mission, vision, values, and goal statements as written in 2022? And that way we could, if they're revised, update the dates, or is that just overcomplicating ordinances which are already complicated?
Well, I don't think there's any problem with referencing our established purpose, definitely. And I was thinking with purpose and intent, like goals and objectives, really. And how if you would relate those back to a comprehensive plan, that's kind of how I was putting it. So if we want to strengthen the purpose by incorporating more language similar to what has been established already back in 2021 or 2020, yeah, that would be appropriate.
I was thinking, in particular, in the goals statement, we talk about ensuring residents have access to healthful, safe, affordable housing in neighborhoods. And some of the language in the ordinance might limit some of the workforce housing access to some of the amenities on some of the properties that might be developed. At least that's how I was reading it, that there could be some development changes. So this is, up for discussion. As I said, rather esoteric, but.
Okay, thank you.
I think it fits.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent use of the mission, goals, and values statement that we've not incorporated heretofore, and I think this is an excellent place to do that.
Good. Great, Susan.
Okay. Anthony, thoughts?
So the only thing that I'll say caught my eye, I have one question that I struggled with, and then just 2 comments. So the first one, under the purpose, I struggled with the word is to guarantee housing affordability.
Correct.
I'm not sure how we can, I mean, if someone can say how we can guarantee that, because it sometimes can come to perception as well. I mean, we know we have an issue here, so I'm not saying it's perception. We have an issue in this community or in this area from housing and affordability, and we're looking at, incomes and so forth. But for us to be able to say that guarantee, I just struggled with that.
Yeah.
And I'm open to a better word. I don't have it, but.
I actually, that caught my eye, and one of the things I thought about was, guarantee the opportunities to develop affordable and attainable housing, because guaranteeing housing means as a township, we would take on almost the responsibility for doing it.
Yeah, correct. So even if there's wording, you can keep that word and add to it
guaranteeing the
to
opportunity
adjust
to develop.
That was the main thing that I struggled with. The other thing, and they only touched on it briefly, going back to the State of the County meeting today, they touched on, affordable housing in the area and so forth. And I'm not sure if it's something that we should put in here, but I don't know if the community is aware, or the county is aware of the first-time home buyers. Based on income, but right now it's up to $10,000 for first-time home buyers in the area, which helps. So it's something that I don't know if it's something that we could put in here for folks that are looking at it, that's an opportunity as well.
I think providing, opportunities or, opportunities for people to see what resources are out there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, the guarantee housing, if somebody has a way to reword that, I'm open to that. Thank you.
About like foster or facilitate?
How about support? How about support the township's goal of
Promote?
Promote?
manager?
The way our workforce housing is written now, the only change that was made to it since its inception in 2009 was in 2012 or 2013. We made it inclusionary, which is guaranteeing that new housing that meets certain density requirements will provide affordable housing, will provide what we call workforce housing. So to the extent there is a mechanism.
That I can understand, so if we can elaborate it, because that doesn't say that here, it just says guarantee housing affordability. But what you're saying, I understand, and I can see how that can be put in here as a guarantee.
I mean, it may run contrary to the idea or the concept of purpose. And I get that, but I wanted to answer your
I can see what you're
question.
saying. It doesn't, if I'm reading this though, I didn't think anything at all of that until you explained that to me.
My concern with that would be the layperson reading that, they see the word guarantee.
Exactly.
That's fair.
Okay.
We'll do everything in our power to support, or I think you'd say
Promote,
whatever.
But then maybe, because the concept of inclusionary housing is one that we've previously wrestled with, and we came down on the side of making the determination that it will be a requirement. Thus the inclusionary.
Right.
But again, I'm not disagreeing. What I'm suggesting is that it may, in some of the points, somewhere we may need to either mention or further elaborate the inclusionary aspect, assuming that that is still the appropriate avenue that council wishes to pursue.
Right, and I guess I would put, there's limitations on that, it's gotta be over a certain size, it's gotta be this and that and everything. So, again, layperson reading, guarantee, that's not, that doesn't work for you, that's not applicable to you. So, that was why
I can't take credit for this because I heard the word come from the audience, but facilitate might be a good word there. If you replace guarantee with facilitate,
Yeah.
it might be the balance.
If Bob Hoffman said that, I'm not sure.
It came from Bob.
I don't know if we can go with that. If it's come from somebody else.
Okay. Anything else, Anthony?
No, that's it.
All right, Eric.
Three questions. Lindsay, in number 2, we note establish regional consistency. So it's fair to assume that when we forward the actual ordinance language, it will have already been reconciled against
Yeah.
what
I
others are
think-
doing?
Well, I hope so. You know, we have some meetings to start this discussion regionally set up. So I know when, before Ferguson took their ordinance to their board, we had the opportunity to look at it and see what was consistent with ours at that
Okay.
point. So, yeah, we are working on
I
it.
just want to make sure if we're going to say this in here that, you know, we're actually going to make that effort.
Yeah, the effort, if I may.
Please.
The effort will definitely be made.
Okay. To what degree we,
The degree to which we achieve success in a balance or in like iterations of ordinances is
so the
perhaps
intent is to
another
try and establish as much regional consistency as,
I think we happen to be in a phase at the moment that we're kind of all from Missouri.
this is getting back to the guarantee.
Yep.
I mean, this is kind of, we're in kind of a show me phase right now. And at the moment, if I do say so, I think the College Township has shown that the inclusionary ordinance and the requirements and the standards that we have set to this point, those which we're now about to embark and revising or reviewing, have worked. And I don't know that that can be said with others' ordinances anywhere in the center region.
So it's ours that they should be reconciling
Yeah.
against.
Well, I'm not going to say that as a manager, but
The gold
members of
standard.
council feel free.
I looked at some of the other ordinances, and I would hope that people would look to our ordinance even without the revisions for what needs to be done.
All right. Let's just enjoy that for a second. All right. Moving on. Two more quick comments. Lindsay, I appreciate what you did here. I wonder, though, if number 4 and number 8 are saying the same thing, and if they're not, what's the difference? They're both kind of repeating the purpose, aren't they? Or maybe offering a little bit more detail on the purpose, but is one saying something, does it merit 2 separate points? Is there enough difference between the two?
Did you say 4 and 8?
Yeah, ensure housing opportunities and maintain workforce housing. And not necessarily something we have to talk about tonight, just a question if I was missing something.
I think the incentives is the key word there.
In 8?
In 8.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have current incentives now in our ordinance. We talked about
Okay.
parkland,
So
stormwater.
we could add that to 4, ensure housing opportunities
Yeah, make
and
them
implement
stronger.
incentives, because then just a suggestion. And then lastly, 5 and 10, same question, or same comment. It seems like we're saying the same thing, just using some different words in 5 and 10.
All right, I can see what I can do to kind of meld those together.
You know, if there's some significant difference, I'm missing it, but that happens all the time, so
All right.
that's all I had.
Rich?
No, my big concern was the guarantee and the purpose, so I think we've touched on that. There's always opportunities for wordsmithing, but planning commission's gonna take their crack at it too.
And maybe
so.
that's the best thing to ask them. I mean, the idea is, we give them the intent, they mold it,
Yeah.
but they could chime in on they think we're missing anything on the intent,
I mean, that works too.
I guess.
But
Well,
overall,
I don't know about that. I think
On this, at this level.
Okay.
The
I was gonna say,
wordsmithing level, maybe.
Maybe some wordsmithing, but I think council has kept the purview for the intent, to provide the intent.
Yeah, I support what we're saying in
If
those
there's a
two,
better way
in
of saying
5 and 10, but can it all be said in one sentence? Or-
Add to, but not
paragraph
take
long.
away, right? Provide conciseness, add to, but not take away from the intent is what we're saying, right? What we want from PC. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's nothing in there I disagree with,
Yeah.
so.
If I may, so we talked about the need to do revisions to, or we wanted, staff had recommended to council that we wanted you to make a determination about making revisions to the workforce housing ordinance. And as the start to that, council had asked Lindsay to go back and to develop the intent. I want to be sure that we're all clear that it's not only the intent that ultimately gets remanded back to Planning Commission. And the purpose of the intent that does end up at Planning Commission is to help instruct the other elements of the review of the ordinance. There need not be, in my opinion, a lot of effort placed on the review and tweaking of the intent. That's the jumping off point. That should be the frame of reference for the ultimate PC review.
Exactly.
Okay?
The ordinance should support the intent.
Yes.
Right, so this is the intent, this is kind of the guiding principles of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, there's the balance of the ordinance. To take this a step further, there are some things in the balance of the ordinance, and we talked about one here just now, that are pretty important to convey to the next reviewing body, in this case PC. That is, maintain and include, for example, it could be council's prerogative to maintain the inclusionary aspects of the workforce housing ordinance. It could be to maintain a dual tract of both rental attainable housing as well as homeowner occupied attainable housing. I mean, there are things that are in the present ordinance that I think might be worthwhile reiterating back as keepers, if you will, to the Planning Commission. The intent statement provides the guidance in the overall, what is trying to be achieved, and that's important, but that's not what really needs to be sliced and diced. The slicing and dicing is in the balance of the ordinance, but I do think it may be appropriate as part of a remand letter to, in addition to forwarding on the intent, to also identify those key principles to keep in mind. And that is something we've not talked about here at council to this point. So I'm suggesting that while the intent is perfect, based on the comments given here tonight, I think the intent is fine, and there's probably just a little wordsmithing to work on there. There may be some other things that we may need to come back to you for some discussion on in order to properly remand this to the Planning Commission. That may or may not be the case, depending upon how council wants to go. But I just want to offer that up, that could assist the Planning Commission as they move through the ordinance.
Well, I mean, I kind of like where you're going with that, and I just offer to, kind of, and my former military colleagues can probably resound with some of this, right? That intent statement is commander's intent, right, and that would shape the operation. And what you're talking about then further is what we used to call key tasks, right? Like, key to this is you must keep inclusionary in this, right? It's not going to be part of the purpose, it's not going to be part of the intent within the ordinance, but the key task that we're assigning to PC is that we want this to remain inclusionary. So, I mean, I'll just say my piece of that and we'll come back around to you guys. I totally support, I don't really have anything further to add to this. I could see the 5 and 10 maybe being a little more concise into one. And I 100% support the development within the remand of, hey, these are the key tasks, the key priorities that we want you to keep within the ordinance. Anything to add to that, Susan?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty clear.
Anthony?
No, I think what you said is exactly it. It's a key task. We want that to be.
Rich?
I guess I haven't heard that we've asked Planning Commission to rewrite the ordinance. Aren't we asking them to look at the current ordinance and determine if it supports or contradicts our intent? What are we asking Planning Commission to? I think I'm trying to be clear.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what we did with short-term rentals is similar to what we're doing now. And Mark and I had that discussion a little bit earlier. We don't think that there are that many changes that need to be made to the ordinance because we feel like it's working fairly well. There are some things that we have to consider, like the AMI and the percentages, but we weren't going to really propose a lot of changes to the ordinance. And as I was preparing the intent, it does go along with how it's existing right now. We could strengthen it in some places, but I think definitely making that connection that the intent matches the ordinance is important.
To identify any disconnects.
Yeah.
Okay.
That said, completely agree. There are some things that need to be reworked. The incentives relative to single-family homeowner occupieds
Right.
with the concessions, if you will, or the incentives that had been laid out before. Sidewalks on one side of the street, street widths, lot sizes, things like that. Those are things that we believe probably need to be reevaluated in terms of, and especially if we're going to do it in terms of our mission, goals, and value statements. So there are some things that are very specific that I think we know or we anticipate going in that do in fact need to be modified.
Right, but that's part of the remand.
Yeah.
I get, quite simply, I don't feel we need to tell Planning Commission, don't change stuff. I think we need to tell them what we are looking at changing, and then the other, that the intent, this is what we see as the intent, does the ordinance run contradictory to that in any way? Okay, that was just my 2 cents.
Okay. Well, it's more than 2 cents. At least
That's all I got left.
Okay. Eric?
I understand what Adam's saying. In fact, I suspect that Lindsay's memo through Mike Bloom was trying to tease a little bit of that out of us tonight. Now that I look at it and I read that very last line that says, additionally, staff is also seeking direction, that's what you're talking about. And so it's more of a philosophical issue. Do we just give them the intent and stand back? Or do we, tonight, or in a future meeting, say, okay, here's the intent, but here's a few things that council is particularly sensitive to or whatever. And I don't know which side I fall on. I just want to note that I see now what I think you're asking, and nothing in here jumps out at me because I didn't see that till just now. So I didn't read the ordinance and say, ooh, geez.
Sure.
I didn't have any strong feelings one way or the other, so.
I think number 6 covers probably everything that we are talking about and what you mentioned, Adam. Because it does include inclusive, from there, and that's just it. So if it's already in the ordinance, I mean, obviously they can play around with it, but it states it in number 6 in the intent that we're still, I mean, if it's in there, leave it or give a reason why not to, I guess.
Right, so if it doesn't match, I can see, that's a good direction, I think, because if they can't see how the ordinance matches the intent, then that's the spot that should be changed.
Well, brought it to our attention
Yeah,
so that we can provide further guidance.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to suggest. Maybe we just entrust staff, who is our liaison there. If something comes up in the deliberations with Planning Commission, they say, well, time out. Let's huddle with council. That would be one approach for getting through this tonight.
I think too, this, looking at it without an intent and purpose statement, as we use this ordinance more frequently, because it's been in the code since 2008, and we only have one development now that has affordable housing units, but I anticipate we probably will have more, and we'll be using this. So the intent and purpose is philosophical, but it sort of introduces the idea of what we're trying to accomplish here, and that was missing. It was the ordinance without that. And looking at some ordinances, they have an intent and purpose, and some don't.
Yeah.
So that helps me as a new person approaching the ordinance.
And you actually touched on it earlier. You get too much in there, you basically painted it into a corner.
Right.
And everything. So there's a balance between.
Right,
you know.
because we could change our vision and mission statement, and all of a sudden now we gotta change every ordinance we have. Yeah, so you gotta be careful with that.
Well, and using the date of the vision and mission statement that we're referencing could be helpful.
Just for the record, I'm fine either way that you wanted to go. I just wanted to clearly point out that you had some choices and some options about how this ends up being remanded and how Planning Commission works through it relative to the task. So.
Well, we know that we need to further, this is part of what we know from our last remand, that we need to further develop a process for the remand, right, with PC and better understanding of that. But we haven't accomplished that yet. So I see where Adam's coming from on, hey, what does PC need for the guidance? But I can get behind and support, hey, we give you this purpose and intent. Let's see what they give it to us. They're very smart folks, right? Let's see what staff and
Well, I think there are some guide rails in these are the we've identified what we're going to modify in the ordinance.
Yeah.
And we said that there's an intent in the remand letter.
Yep.
The intent is not to rewrite the ordinance. The intent, to make subtle changes that further support
What's in
the
there.
proposed purpose and intent.
Yeah,
That's
that's absolutely.
And also, is there consistency? If we're adding the purpose and the intent, are we doing that and remaining consistent with what's already existing in the ordinance as it stands?
Yeah, that's your direction within the remand letter. It's not to rewrite the ordinance. It's to address necessary modifications, redline it where needed, per what we're giving you here.
And confirm that the existing ordinance
Yeah, I think
generally
that's important,
supports
is that
the
the
purpose
purpose and intent, are consistent with the existing, because we're not changing the existing ordinance by much.
Yeah, because you just talked about how great it was.
I did.
Yeah.
I put it out there. I caused consternation, but I said it.
Okay. Are we good?
I think so.
Okay.
I have some, I think you two will help in writing the remand, so are you good?
Yeah, I guess there's, as I look at it, there's a couple paths forward. Staff can go back and craft the remand letter based on what we heard tonight and share it as we do, or we could bring it back to you at the October 19th meeting and hash it out a little bit there if there's any uncomfort around the table. It's a nuance kind of thing, but whichever your preference is, I think there's two ways we could go with it.
How about you share with us, and if we can't come to a consensus, then we'll hash it out the next meeting.
Sure.
I want the do nothing. Where's the do nothing option?
Yeah, where's the do nothing
He's
option?
not gonna let that one go, is he?
Is that?
We just let Bob take his notes, and that's it. Done. He gets nothing.
You get nothing?
Okay, we're ready to move on. Old business number 2, spin e-bike update from Mr. Bloom.
All right, this is just closing the loop on a discussion that's kind of hung out there for quite a while. The Spin e-bike program, we had discussions actually going back into last year about the potential for an expansion of Spin Bike into College Township. Council on a couple of instances have had a discussion about this and talked about wanting to see the master services agreement with Penn State University, between Penn State University and Spin, before there was comfort in moving forward. As staff noted in April, in discussions previously with Cecily Zhu from Penn State University Transportation Services, Penn State was not comfortable sharing that master services agreement, but would be happy to offer to answer questions. Staff did follow up after the last discussion on a couple instances with Ms. Zhu. To date, we've had no response. The secondary directive that was given was to start some discussions with Spin about what the service area would look like, geofencing and all those other factors. To date, those inquiries to Spin have gone unanswered. So at this juncture, it appears that there is a limited amount of interest in the expansion into College Township, and staff has reached a point where they are no longer expending efforts on those directives. In other words, staff is suggesting do nothing.
Yes! All right, council.
See, that's why it's an option.
Let's go around
That's
the
an
horn.
option.
Since Rich is so fired up on this, we'll let him start. Let's go around the horn and share your thoughts on this.
Fully support the do nothing.
Okay.
I do too, but it is disappointing, not on staff's part, on Spin's part, because remember, we put a lot of effort into this.
Yeah.
Man, we drew in Park and Rec, we had some hearty debate, and there was excitement.
Yeah.
People in the township were talking about it. So, yeah, I support the do nothing, but I'm disappointed.
Yeah. Anthony?
Do nothing.
Do nothing.
Yeah, I support the do nothing. I mean, I'm really disappointed. I'm really surprised that Spin just has dropped the ball too.
Yeah, and it's inconsistent, and it may have been changeover of personnel.
At Penn State, too.
And there's changeover at Penn State. So while I am saying do nothing facetiously, should the opportunity come back in a different form, if there's a demand that generates kind of more organically, then by all means, staff would be back in front of you having these discussions again. But at this juncture, it seems like wasted.
This comes off of the task list, is what you're saying. Yeah.
There may be issues at the master agreement with Penn State level. That
Sure.
This is, a business decision may be being made.
And again, as we referenced, there's a lot of changeover happening in that department, particularly at Penn State. So, and I'm not sure what the term of the master services agreement is. When they renegotiate, that may be the window of opportunity as well. So.
Right.
Okay. All right, moving on to old business number 3, which is ordinance O-23-05, Shiloh Road PRBD rezoning, de minimis clarifications, discussion and possible action.
Thank you. So staff has been reviewing our proposed draft pending ordinance, and over the last week or so, we've identified a few areas that may present some uncertainty in the interpretation by the township, but also by some developers and others in the community. So we've outlined 3 de minimis technical corrections that we want to review with you. We don't feel, by these being de minimis, we don't feel that they change the intent of what we were trying to do, but we're here to get your input. So the first one, I'm not going to read the whole sentence, but if you look at the first box in your memo, line 289, halfway through, starts, land devoted to non-residential uses may be deemed to include driveways, parking areas, and yards, which primarily service non-residential uses, but may not, for purposes of calculation, include common open space. We feel that the intention the evening of the special meeting, that should not have been in there. So we feel it should read that those land devoted to non-residential uses may be deemed to include driveways, parking areas, and yards, which primarily service non-residential uses, but may, for purposes of calculation, include common open space. We wanted to go through unintended consequences, and the one for this would be by allowing these other uses, these other spaces like driveways, parking areas, and yards to be included as non-residential, we could possibly lose the actual non-residential, AKA mixed use element of the plan or of the development. But we did, since it's a conditional use and we talked all about those may statements and how they're optional, we really don't think that changing the may and may not is it's a critical move, but we wanted to get your interpretation. Because with this interim zoning change, we do want to consider flexibility within the ordinance because it is the conditional use.
All right, yeah, let's, I kind of like how we're going with this so far. Let's just take these one at a time.
Okay.
Council, thoughts on that one? Anthony?
No issue.
Susan? My only question arises, and maybe I'm not seeing this correctly, but why wouldn't we just eliminate a lot of words here and just include common open space into include driveways, parking areas, and yards, and common open space?
I think one of the rationale about where the may becomes important is that's, as you go through your deliberative process, the other elements are kind of embedded into the calculation of non-residential. Open space becomes a negotiation point.
Okay. All right. Rich?
I'm still trying to, because I read it with one voice in my head and I get one thing, and I read it on one of my other ones and it comes out different. Is the big thing that we're trying to not allow, like happened at the villas, that they counted every little nook and cranny towards open space, but it's not usable open space. Are we trying to prevent that? Is that what we're trying to prevent?
One of the concerns I think that pops up as you read through this and read it at its kind of strictest interpretation, when you see the 30% non-residential, okay, so if I'm a developer who is coming in with primary intent of residential, then already 30% of my development is geared towards non-residential. As you read the rest of the ordinance, there's also a requirement for 30% of open space. So again, at the strictest most read, there's 60% of my developable space that is now locked up and becomes limiting, which is counterintuitive to the intent here. We're trying to be flexible, and that becomes more rigid than I think the overall intent.
Okay. Okay. I heard somebody in the audience agree, it's therefore I have to agree.
I heard a grunt.
I think economically and for cost benefit of development.
Yeah, come on, just step up to the mic.
I feel better.
Your voice carries well, but.
Bob Hoffman, Planning Commission. I think the point is, when we start looking at 60% and you're a developer, it really limits your objectives in the first place. And so I would strongly recommend that we listen to Mike's recommendation.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, this has been an interesting exercise because it has been a full staff exercise in looking at it, and that, as we went around, individual members of staff have played devil's advocate in reading this as well. So yeah, this is a full staff effort to this, and that small change we think hits the intent that was discussed at really this level and to an extent the Planning Commission as well. That flexibility piece kind of gets locked up by that knot.
Okay.
Well, yeah, thanks for the explanation because it kind of bent my mind a little bit. Anything else, Rich?
No, nothing for me.
Going last, now I understand it. If I'd have gone first, I wouldn't have. I'll say that it's de minimis in language, but pretty profound in impact.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah.
So I support it for the reasons that you just articulated.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one.
All right, so the next is a table in line 309, and this was just consistency with the other text. The first part, the ordinance everywhere else says, multifamily uses including duplexes, townhomes, and multifamily residences. So the table didn't say that. To make it consistent with the rest of the ordinance, we wanted to just make that. Go to line 319, and there's a conflict between that line, which states a building shall be set back a minimum of 5 feet from the edge of the public right-of-way, and the table stated 50. So we figured that we just need to strike that and in the table would just state what the purpose is. We didn't think that this is going to have any unintended consequences because we're just kind of tightening up a little conflict in language.
Okay.
Any?
Questions? Support? Rich, you go?
Make Eric go first.
Like Eric.
I'm just going to have to trust staff's judgment on this because, without seeing everything, I'm just trusting that eliminating it's the best thing to do.
Yep, it is. Because a building shall be set back a minimum of 5 feet from the edge of the right-of-way conflicts with 50 feet. So we just struck the 5 feet and stuck with that. So, okay.
Anthony.
I'm okay with the rationale, yeah.
Susan.
Yeah, I get what you're doing. I'm okay with it.
Okay.
So is it the 50 feet in the arterial streets? Like, what are you referring to?
Let me get back. Sorry, I'm a little confused on this one as well. So 35, 50, 50, 35, 50, 50. And a building shall be set back a minimum of 5 feet.
It appears that you got a couple different conflicts, 319 says a building, and then you have a chart that has
types of buildings.
Yeah. So you've got, and 319 doesn't differentiate between the types. And then,
Right.
Ultimately, we're leaning into let the table do the talking.
let the table do the talking.
Yeah.
And that's all,
319 limits
everything,
the table.
there's no other lines to this table besides this.
No, there's only the 2 lines to the table.
Okay, then,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Rich?
No, that's the consistency by including the duplexes and elimination of conflict should be our goals.
Okay. All right, keep us moving, Lindsay.
Okay, so the following are interpretations of the pending ordinance. And this is just to make sure that any past precedents set in other developments are being consistent as we move forward. So the first one, line 311 in the box, non-residential buildings may not be located closer than 50 feet to residential buildings. That could easily be taken as, if I have non-residential on the first floor, do I have to keep my residentials 50 feet away? And that wasn't our intention. So we would,
That'd be interesting.
we would interpret that as not having to be the case in multi-story buildings. Line 320, non-residential uses shall provide a minimum 10-foot sidewalk. That was sort of vague, so the interpretation was a 10-foot sidewalk along the street and not just, in front of the building. Line 355, surface parking lots are not permitted along street facing frontages between the right-of-way property line and the principal building face. So that is true, but you can still have a parking area street facing so long as it's not between the building and the right-of-way. And then Mike sort of touched on this one too, 367, a minimum of 30% of the gross area of the planned residential development within the PRBD shall be devoted to public or common open space. And when we talked about line 290 earlier, we do permit those driveways, parking areas, and yards be counted toward that open space.
Okay.
So we're just seeking your concurrence to see if you feel that this is all.
Questions, discussion on the interpretations, Anthony?
None.
Susan?
None.
I have none. Rich?
I do on 320. Non-residential uses shall provide a minimum 10-foot sidewalk. Is that width or length?
We can change it to width.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah. I think it's called out elsewhere in the, about a 10-foot width, but.
Nice, nice.
Well played.
Consistency.
Do nothing.
Okay.
No, I'm saying.
Or do nothing.
Or do nothing.
Anything else?
No, that was it, thanks.
Eric?
So how are interpretations documented? Is this just telling council how staff's going to interpret this?
Yeah, I think just for the record, believe to have it on record.
Yeah, I'll let Mark jump in here in just a minute, but basically, I think one of the parts of this exercise was trying to read this and understanding precisely what it meant and how it was going to be applied to anything that might come through the door, obviously. And it was written with that intent. But between writing it and then having something we wanted to go through it some more, so we did. So with the fine tooth comb, and going through it with the fine tooth comb, we realized there's a couple of things here. Yes, there were a couple of these inconsistencies, these de minimis things, which we talked about and have addressed. But the other issue was that there are interpretations that we have made in the past on various projects elsewhere in the township that we would look to make the same kinds of interpretations in this ordinance. And I know, Mark, you probably wanted to speak to some examples.
Like this 311, you guys, a lot of you were here when the development Aspen Heights came in. The Gateway Commercial Zoning District called out that if the ground level of the building was non-residential, that allowed for the residential above. And so we wanted to be, during our discussion, I said my interpretation would lean towards what we've already experienced there. If a mixed-use building is put in and 50% of that ground floor of that building is non-residential, then I would consider that as non-residential and the other 50% as residential, even if there were 4 stories of apartments above it. It's that ground floor. I would interpret that the same way as we had done with the Gateway Commercial.
Okay, I understand that part, and I think that's good. The only reason I brought it up is there the potential to just add a word or two to the ordinance and then not necessarily need the interpretation? Just a cleaner approach. For example, on 311, could you add the word exclusive non-residential, or non-residential buildings that are exclusively non-residential maybe, and further define the ordinance so you don't need the interpretation?
Understood, but we've already advertised and have a pending ordinance.
Then that answers my question.
And that was
patching.
I think if we were starting from ground zero again,
That's what we do.
we would probably wordsmith that and capture those things. But it's already in play, it's already being advertised, and thus, any changes that we make really need to be clarifying de minimis types of things.
No, that answers my question. That makes sense now. And at least in the case of 311, we're already doing that anyways.
Right.
Okay.
I think the International Building Code will help you on 311 a little bit too,
Yeah.
in the definition of a building and those uses.
Anything else?
Nope.
Does anybody feel comfortable with the motion?
I move to authorize staff to incorporate the proposed technical corrections to lines 292, 309, 319, and approve the proposed interpretations of lines 311, 320, 355, and 367.
Do you have a second?
A second.
Do we need, are we going to make a modification to 320?
Yeah, sorry, that was missed. It
10
wasn't.
foot wide.
Yeah.
So could that
We can
just,
add that as a technical correction to 320 if you're willing to adjust your.
And include
Technical
the
correction.
technical correction to line 320.
Do you have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, no opposed.
Thank you all
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
All right, so we have no new business this evening. And staff, do you have anything outside of what's in your packet? All right. Council, any other matters? Staff, other matters? All right.
Oh, does anybody want to tell me whether you are going to the county association banquet on October 30th? You're going? I'm going to check. Okay.
Okay, anybody else? All right.
I move that we do nothing the rest of the night.
And so,
nothing
can
left
I,
I will second that.
let's be a little more blatant about what we're gonna do with
What
that.
to do?
What's the motion?
I move to adjourn?
All right.
Towards that,
We're adjourned.
our intent is